Power does not begin with strength. It begins with meaning. Before any battle is fought, before any enemy is revealed, before any world is placed at risk, the foundation of the story is established through the hero not as a man, but as a symbol. This is where true authority is born. The hero is introduced not to be admired, but to be believed in. He is not framed as an individual chasing greatness. He is framed as an answer to a need. The universe does not revolve around him, rather, he exists because the universe demands balance. From the very first moment, his presence communicates inevitability. He is not slouchy. He is purpose made visible. At the core of this foundation lies identity, not identity as a name or face, but identity as responsibility. The hero's dual existence is not a gimmick. It is a statement. One form represents restraint, humility, and belonging among ordinary beings. The other represents what is unlocked only when duty calls. Transformation is not about gaining power. It is about accepting burden. The ritual of transformation is deliberate, solemn, and symbolic. It communicates that power is never casual. It must be invoked with intent, and only when necessary. This distinction matters because it separates the hero from tyrants and monsters. Villains seize power. Heroes are entrusted with it. The source of the hero's strength is not internal ego, technology, or brute force. It flows from something older, greater, and morally elevated. A sacred source. A living legacy. This immediately reframes power as borrowed, not owned. The hero is a conduit, not a god. This ensures that even at his most dominant, he remains accountable to something beyond himself. His strength has rules. His authority has limits. His role has consequences. This is the first and most important message. Power without alignment is corruption. The environment surrounding the hero reinforces this symbolism. He does not emerge from chaos. He emerges from tradition. Ancient structures, timeless institutions, and guardians of wisdom surround him. These are not decorative elements, they are narrative anchors. They signal continuity. The hero is not an exception to history. He is its latest expression. Generations before him protected the balance, and generations after him will inherit the outcome of his choices. Even companionship is symbolic. The hero is not alone, and not above connection. His closest ally is not a subordinate, but a reflection fear transformed into courage. Instinct refined into loyalty. This bond humanizes the hero without weakening him. It reminds the audience that strength is amplified by trust, not isolation. That even the most powerful force in the world is grounded by relationship. Emotionally, this creates safety. The audience understands that this hero will not act recklessly. He will not abandon empathy in pursuit of victory. He carries power, but he also carries restraint. The language used around the hero is intentional. He is not described as invincible. He is described as responsible. He is not celebrated for destruction, but for protection. His victories are framed as preservation, not conquest. This subtly trains the audience to redefine success. Winning does not mean defeating an enemy. It means ensuring continuity of life, culture, and hope. Visually and narratively, the hero's presence stabilizes the world. When he appears, chaos slows. When he speaks, others listen not because they are afraid, but because they recognize legitimacy. This is the difference between authority and fear. Authority is granted. Fear is imposed. The hero operates in the former. Crucially, the story does not rush to justify him. There is no desperate exposition trying to convince the audience of his worth. His existence is treated as self-evident. This confidence is strategic. When a narrative does not beg for validation, it appears powerful. The audience leans in rather than questioning. The hero's moral alignment is unambiguous, but not simplistic. He believes in life as sacred, not selectively, but universally. This belief is not tested yet, but it is clearly embedded. It foreshadows future decisions. It warns both allies and enemies that while he is capable of destruction, he will always seek another path first. This restraint is not weakness. It is discipline at its highest level. Importantly, the hero does not define himself against the villain. He exists independently of opposition. This ensures that even if no enemy appeared, his purpose would remain intact. He is a guardian, not a reaction. This elevates the narrative from conflict-driven to principle-driven. At a strategic level, This foundation accomplishes something critical. It converts the hero into a measuring stick. Every other character leader, ally, alien, or enemy, is evaluated in relation to him. Not by power level, but by values. How they treat life. How they use strength. How they respond to fear. The hero becomes the standard against which the world is judged. This is why the opening phase matters so deeply. Before the arena, before the war, before the verdict. The audience must understand one thing clearly. This is not a story about who is strongest. This is a story about what strength means. The hero is no longer just a figure in the narrative. He is the moral gravity of the universe. Everything that follows knowledge, conflict, judgment will bend around him. And because of this foundation, when the world is finally tested, the outcome will not depend on force. It will depend on whether others can rise to the level of the symbol he represents. A civilization is not defined by the weapons it builds, nor by the borders it protects. It is defined by how it responds when the unknown arrives. It expands the story outward, transforming the world from a backdrop into a testing ground, and elevating the narrative from personal heroism to civilizational judgment. The arrival of an external intelligence is not framed as an invasion, but as an encounter. This distinction is critical. The unknown does not announce hostility. It announces curiosity. It comes not to conquer, but to observe. In doing so, it forces the world to confront itself. For the first time, the planet is no longer the center of existence. It is one among many, and it is being watched. This shift in perspective immediately redefines scale. History, once thought vast, becomes brief. Power, once thought absolute, becomes relative. The civilization is no longer measuring itself against internal rivals, but against the standards of the universe. This is where true tension begins, not in battle, but in awareness. The external intelligence represents something fundamentally destabilizing, perspective without emotion. It is ancient, patient, and unconcerned with individual lives. It speaks in terms of eras, stars, and extinction. It has seen worlds rise and fall. To it, civilizations are patterns, not people. This contrast exposes the fragility of the tested world. Its fears, traditions, and conflicts suddenly feel small under a cosmic lens. Leadership is immediately put on trial. Those in power must decide whether to respond with fear or with openness. This decision is not cosmetic. It defines the moral maturity of the civilization. Fear leads to isolation, militarization, and control. Openness leads to risk, dialogue, and growth. Neither path is safe, but only one is progressive. Choosing engagement over rejection signals confidence. It says, "We believe our values can withstand scrutiny." This is a powerful declaration, and it is not made lightly. Knowledge, once invited, cannot be undone. Observation cannot be unobserved. By allowing the unknown to enter, the civilization accepts that it may be judged and found wanting. The world's institutions react differently. Some see opportunity advancement, alliance, transcendence. Others see threat, loss of control, exposure of weakness, collapse of hierarchy. These reactions are not random. They reveal character. Fear disguises itself as caution. Control disguises itself as protection. Wisdom must cut through both. The presence of the observer turns everyday life into evidence. How civilians are treated. How leaders speak in private. How power is used when no one is supposed to be watching. The test is not announced, but it is active. This is the most uncomfortable kind of trial, one where behavior, not performance, determines the outcome. Importantly, the observer does not interfere. It does not correct, warn, or assist. It simply watches. This restraint makes its role far more powerful. It suggests confidence. It implies that the civilization's fate will be self-determined. The universe does not need to punish failure. Failure collapses on its own. The hero's role during this phase is subtle but essential. He is not the focus of attention. He does not dominate the encounter. Instead, he becomes a silent reference point. His presence reassures some and unsettles others. He represents the highest version of what the civilization claims to be. If the world fails the test, it will not be because it lacked strength. It will be because it lacked alignment with the principles he embodies. The narrative tension does not come from action, but from anticipation. Everyone senses that something is being weighed, even if they cannot articulate it. The air feels heavier. Decisions feel permanent. Small choices begin to matter more than grand gestures. The story slows intentionally, allowing discomfort to build. This is where arrogance becomes dangerous. Some believe that technological advancement or military readiness alone will impress the observer. They prepare demonstrations of force, efficiency, and scale. But these displays miss the point. Raw capability is common in the universe. What is rare is restraint. Others argue for secrecy, for hiding flaws, for presenting a curated version of reality. This impulse reveals insecurity. A civilization confident in its values does not need to edit itself. The observer does not demand perfection, it evaluates integrity. As knowledge flows in both directions, the imbalance becomes clear. The civilization learns how small it is. The observer learns how conflicted it is. This asymmetry heightens stakes without a single weapon being raised. The audience understands. If judgment comes, it will not be based on potential, but on conduct. It also reframes time. The observer speaks of futures and extinctions with calm certainty. This forces characters to confront legacy. What will remain of their choices? What will be remembered when individuals are gone? This awareness destabilizes ego-driven ambition and elevates long-term thinking. By the end of this phase, the world is no longer innocent. It cannot return to ignorance. It has stepped onto a larger stage. Whether it advances or collapses will depend on how it handles pressure, not from an enemy, but from understanding. This is the quiet brilliance of part. It transforms the story into something unavoidable. Conflict is no longer optional. The test has begun, and the criteria are invisible. The civilization is now inside the arena, even if it does not yet realize it. When a civilization is observed, its fractures become visible. Pressure does not create chaos, it reveals it. Marks the moment where tension crystallizes into conflict, not as a failure of peace, but as an exposure of truth. War does not arrive suddenly. It emerges from choices already made, values already compromised, and ambitions already misaligned. The enemy does not appear as a simple antagonist. It arrives, organized, prepared, and deliberate. This is not mindless destruction. It is calculated dominance. The opposing force understands fear as a tool and confusion as a weapon. It targets symbols before structures, morale before walls. The goal is not just victory, it is submission. This is critical. True villains do not merely want to win. They want the world to accept that resistance is futile. The scale of the assault immediately contrasts with the restraint shown earlier by the observer. Where the observer watched without interference, the enemy acts without hesitation. This juxtaposition forces a stark comparison between two uses of power, one measured, one exploitative. The battlefield becomes a moral stage long before it becomes a physical one. Civilians flee. Institutions strain. Leadership is tested not in speeches, but in seconds. The illusion of control collapses. In this chaos, hierarchy either proves its worth or dissolves entirely. Orders shouted without clarity amplify panic. Decisions made without compassion accelerate collapse. War strips pretense with ruthless efficiency. The hero enters not as a savior descending from above, but as an anchor in the storm. His presence does not erase danger, it organizes response. He does not promise safety, he creates possibility. This distinction preserves credibility. A hero who claims certainty lies. A hero who offers resolve inspires. Around him others rise, not because they are commanded, but because they are enabled. This is a defining feature of legitimate power. It multiplies capability rather than centralizing it. Warriors, leaders, and even the underestimated step into roles they did not know they could fill. Conflict becomes a crucible, refining potential through necessity. The enemy escalates. Technology, creatures, and raw force are deployed not simply to overwhelm, but to provoke reaction. Every tactic is designed to push the defenders into desperation, to make them abandon restraint in favor of brutality. The villain understands that corruption spreads faster than fear. If the defenders compromise their values, the battle is already won. This is where the narrative sophistication emerges. The fight is not about territory, it is about transformation. Will the civilization become what it hates in order to survive? Will it trade its principles for efficiency? The enemy's greatest weapon is not strength, it is temptation. As the conflict widens, destruction becomes unavoidable. Buildings fall, Lives are lost. This is not sanitized violence. It is weighty and consequential. Each loss matters. Each sacrifice lingers. The story does not glorify chaos. It mourns it. This tone is intentional. It prevents the audience from mistaking spectacle for success. At the height of escalation, intervention arrives not from within the battle, but from above it. The observer reasserts presence, not as a warrior, but as an arbiter. This shift reframes the conflict instantly. What was chaos becomes procedure. What was war becomes examination. The concept of the arena is fully realized here, not as a location, but as a condition. The battlefield is paused, compressed, and redefined. A rule is imposed. Further destruction is unnecessary. Power will now be evaluated, not unleashed. This moment is destabilizing for all sides. The enemy resists constraint. The defenders question legitimacy. But the rule is absolute. This is not negotiation, it is judgment. Each side is instructed to present its champion, its purest expression of power and intent. This demand strips away excuses. Armies are no longer relevant. Technology is secondary. What remains is essence. Who represents you when all excess is removed? Who carries your values into the center? The hero accepts without hesitation, not because he is confident of victory, but because he understands responsibility. Refusal would be an admission that the civilization's strength depends on numbers and weapons, not character. Acceptance is not bravado, it is accountability. The duel that follows is intense, but restrained. Every exchange is symbolic. The enemy fights to dominate, to humiliate, to break will. The hero fights to contain, to endure, to protect. This contrast is deliberate. The audience is shown two philosophies colliding in real time. Traps, tricks, and overwhelming force are unleashed against the hero. Each escalation is designed to force a fatal response. Each time, restraint holds, not passivity control. This is the distinction that defines superiority. Power that cannot stop itself is weakness, disguised as strength. As the battle reaches its peak, the enemy crosses a final line, unleashing something it cannot control. This is the ultimate confession. The villain would rather destroy everything than risk losing authority. In that moment, its ideology collapses under its own weight. The hero intervenes, not to strike, but to prevent annihilation. Even now, even here, life is protected. This act reframes the entire conflict. The question is no longer who is stronger. The question is who deserves to decide the future. Ends not with triumph, but with silence. The noise of battle fades, replaced by the weight of consequence. Everyone understands that something irreversible has occurred. The conflict has revealed what force never could. Power exposes who you are when nothing stops you. When the battle ends, what remains is not victory, but consequence. Part 4 is not about celebration or defeat. It is about reckoning. The noise has faded, the forces have been halted, and the universe itself leans in to observe the final measure. This is where power is no longer expressed through action, but through decision. Silence becomes the dominant force. In that silence, every choice made during the conflict is weighed. Not selectively, not politically, completely. The observer steps forward not as a participant, but as an authority beyond allegiance. It does not congratulate. It does not condemn. It assesses. This distance gives its judgment weight. Emotion would weaken it. Detachment strengthens it. The first truth established is simple and devastating. Strength alone is irrelevant. Both sides demonstrated power. Both proved capable of destruction. If force were the metric, the conflict would have ended in mutual ruin. That outcome is dismissed immediately not because it is tragic, but because it is meaningless. Extinction teaches nothing. The observer articulates what the battle has already shown. Power without restraint escalates until it consumes its source. Violence, left unchecked, simplifies every future into the same ending. This is not philosophy, it is pattern recognition. The universe has seen this before, countless times. Across worlds that believe themselves exceptional, the losing side expects annihilation. This expectation exposes its worldview. To them, defeat only has one conclusion. Mercy is inconceivable because it was never an option they would have offered. Their fear is not of punishment, but of irrelevance. To be spared is to be judged unworthy of hatred. This is their true terror. The hero stands at the center of this moment, not as a conqueror, but as a witness. He does not demand justice. He does not argue for leniency. He simply refuses to endorse extermination. This refusal is quiet but absolute. It is not motivated by sympathy for the enemy, but by loyalty to principle. Life, once taken, cannot be justified retroactively. This is the turning point. The observer does not ask whether the enemy deserves mercy. It asks whether the civilization deserves survival. This reframing is crucial. The verdict is not about the defeated, it is about the victors. What they choose now will echo longer than any battle. Compassion emerges not as an emotion, but as a discipline. It is not weakness. It is control exercised at the hardship. The end.